if you can build a company of people who feel like that about each other, you can control that action. It's 100% in your control as a leader, right? It's how do you treat people? Do they feel respected? Do they feel part of a family? Do they feel like they can come to you with a problem? Do they feel like you're consistent? Do they feel, right? Like there's all of that stuff. And if you can create that, that's an action. Everything else is a result.
Welcome to the Set Apart Podcast. My name is Oscar Morón, the host and the president and founder of John Bell Construction. Today we have Jeff Gouveia Jr., somebody that is a mentor of mine, somebody that I've had the pleasure of knowing for almost 15 years, I would say. He president of Suffolk in different capacities, is at Suffolk for almost 30 years. Somebody that really created the culture at Suffolk Construction, and somebody that honestly means a lot to me because if those who remember in the first episode of the podcast, I resigned to someone at Suffolk, and here he is. We brought him all the way down from New York, right? Is it New York?
Newport. You're Rhode Island. Yeah.
Rhode Island. So. We really appreciate you being here and joining us here in Miami.
Yeah, I'm thrilled, and I'm thrilled to see what you've built here. Right?
Yeah, it's been interesting the last 10 years where we can. It feels like yesterday that I was resigning to you in your office and I was crying, and I remember people were saying, why are you crying? And I said it's because I love working at Suffolk, and the culture and the people that we had there. Really made me who I am, and they're friends and family. But I knew, you told me, you said, why is this? Why do you want to do this? And I said, I don't want to do this. I feel like I need to do this. Yeah. And I think an interesting story was when you told me, hey, I support you, whatever you need to do, but don't throw away your uniform. And if it doesn't work out, we'll put you on the job and you'll be right here. So yeah. That really meant a lot to me.
Well, thank you. I mean. Listen, when you build relationships with people, right, it transcends business, I think. And so you and I had the great fortune of building a relationship over several years. And when you came in to talk to me, I could clearly tell that starting a business was what you needed to do, right? I knew you well enough to know that the passion that you spoke with in our discussion brought you to tears, right? And so you were a superstar for us. But sometimes you have to, it really was, it was difficult to see you leave. I told you that. It was very difficult to see you leave. But you have to make it about the person. And I could tell how passionate you were. I asked you a few questions about the why, right? And I know that at that point you didn't know exactly why, but it was there.
Yeah.
And so what I wanted you to do was to dare greatly, I guess. Mm-hmm. And by saying to you, listen, go do this, and if it doesn't work out, you can walk right back in, and like you never left. What I wanted you to know is that backstop was there. So dare greatly, go do it, right? And you did. Wow.
Yeah. Right. It's crazy because leading up to that time, and it wasn't that people were against me, it's that people just, it's hard to believe in something that you can't see. Mm-hmm. And for someone to buy into a business that didn't have a name, that didn't have work, that didn't have employees, that didn't have an office, that had nothing, just a belief in, hey, we can be a strong company known for its people and its workmanship, and that I don't believe it really exists enough in this city. I didn't have, the support that I thought I was going to get. And during that conversation, it was one of the first times that I got the support from someone other than, my wife. Mm-hmm. And, I really appreciate that. And it makes for a good story now.
Well, I mean, I'm thrilled to see what this has become. I think it's really neat. But in everyone's life, there comes a point in time where you need to put them first, right? And from a business standpoint, it was very difficult to see you leave. I mean, you were playing a major role on a major project, so it was very difficult to see you leave. But you can't be selfish in those situations, right? And the passion that you showed for what you wanted to do, I knew that you had to go.
Yeah.
Like you had to go do this. And how selfish would I have been if I talked you out of it, and then none of this ever happened?
Yeah.
Right?
I always think about that. But I always when I think of Jeff Gouveia, I think of like leadership. Why do you harp on leadership so much? Why is leadership so important? Because what you're saying there is, you are my leader in the organization. Why was that so important to you to support me and to accept the fact that, hey, I was leaving Suffolk, and why is leadership so important to you?
Well, the answer to the first question is because we were friends. That's what friends do for each other. They support each other, and that's in building a company, right? You want to build a company of people who like each other, right? Who become friends, and there are many times that the friendship piece sometimes brings the business bad news, right? Oscar's leaving. Bad news for the company, bad news for the project, right? Good news for Oscar.
Yeah.
And in that particular situation, the friendship was what was most important there. And leadership, I think, is focused on building trust with people. It really is, because there is no leadership without trust. There isn't, right? And trust is built through days, weeks, months, years of friendship, right? It's built through support. It's built through, good morning. It's built through a lot of these different types of things where, and once that friendship gets solidified, there are things that you need to do for friends, or you need to do for them is not the right word, but there's things that you need to give them advice on when they come to you, and you have to do it with the lens of not just the business lens, right? It has to be the friendship lens. Now, sometimes there's a situation where the friend may not exactly know what they want to do, and you have to have a larger conversation. You had conviction, like I need to do this. I could tell, right? If your conviction was 50% of what it was when you came in to see me, that may have been a lot longer conversation. That may have lasted weeks.
Yeah.
Let's go have lunch. Tell me a little bit more about this. Right?
Yeah. Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. But your conviction was such that I knew that, you needed to do your thing.
Where did you get that? Where did you get that leadership style from? Because it's a very ordinary type of leadership. People sometimes lead out of love. Some people lead out of fear. You harp on always leading on trust. Where did you get that from?
Well, I mean, obviously, I had a really good mentor in my dad, which you know very well.
Absolutely.
And also, over time, I've had some really good mentors. Right, John Fish obviously was one of those. Is one of those people. Okay. But when you value your interaction with people, right? When you put friendship and compassion above other things, and friendship and compassion are not things that get spoken about in our business very often.
Yes,
right? And that's why it's a little bit atypical, because our business is a hard business, right? Construction's a hard business. But if you approach it in a way that's a little atypical, right? It's interesting for people, right?
It really sets you apart.
Yeah. Well, I mean, somebody at one point asked me, what's my business plan, right? And at that point, it was a little earlier in my career, and I was a little caught off guard. And I said, and sometimes you say something that just comes in your gut, right? And so I said, I want to build a company of people who really like each other. That's my business plan. And they're like, well, that's odd, right? And I really think that if you can build a company of people who are like this, you can't put your finger on that. That's a subjective measurement, right? But everybody, you would know what I meant when you said like that. But if you can build a company of people who feel like that about each other, you can control that action. It's 100% in your control as a leader, right? It's how do you treat people? Do they feel respected? Do they feel part of a family? Do they feel like they can come to you with a problem? Do they feel like you're consistent? Do they feel, right? Like there's all of that stuff. And if you can create that, that's an action. Everything else is a result.
It sounds very simple, and the reality is it is, but there's instances because life happens. Life is tough. Sometimes you're having an issue with your wife or your husband. Job's not going the right way. The owner's putting a lot of pressure. Maybe you just had a flat tire, and that's something that I struggle with. Where I wanna listen to that person. I wanna hear them through to the end of their sentence. But I sometimes get so caught up what's happening to me that I have a hard time really talking to them at their level and really understanding them. And it's part of the growth process that I'm going through, because I've realized that people want they want to be listened to, and they have their own problems.
What that's called is being human, by the way. What you're describing is being human, right? So
but sometimes in leadership they expect that the leader is not human, and I've almost learned and brainwashed myself to believe that I'm not, because to do things that you're not prepared to do, you have to do things that you're not capable of. So it's something that I'm working on, and it's something that I got from my family, which is where I was going is, how was it growing up with your dad as a mentor, and your family growing up? How was that? How was that?
Yeah, I mean, it was great. I mean, my dad, he's kind of one of a kind, right? And I think his approach to...
Hold on, and by the way, his dad hired me. So his dad hired me, and then I resigned or quit with his son, It's like, hey, what did you do? I got him here, and you let him go. But anyways, so how was it with your dad and your mom and your family?
I'm very blessed, right? We have a really tight-knit family. My parents I speak to, probably 4 or 5 times a week. They live in Tennessee. We FaceTime each other on the weekends, and I was just very blessed that I grew up with a lot of structure, right? I think that's the best way to put it. A lot of love and a lot of structure, and what that structure taught me was organizational skills and things like that I may not have that I may not have gained otherwise. Another kind of,
because he was in the military.
He's a military guy, right? Yeah. So, but one of the turning points I think for me was, so I grew up kind of working in the field, like in the summertime, working with the tools, and he really wanted to make sure that I understood what it was like to actually work with the tools and to learn that, right?
Is that how you first got into construction?
Yeah. So I started sweeping floors, and from there, the next summer I was on a formwork crew, and then the next summer I was on a drywall crew. So, but I was always, and I was always in a role that was very junior, right? Because he wanted me to be able to learn
and appreciate
in a very junior level. So, and I did that all the way through college. And then it's kind of an interesting story. So, when I would go to interviews, and I was a philosophy major in college, by the way, right? So there's an interesting story behind that. So when I was a sophomore in college, my parents got a letter, and they said, "You get this letter in the mail. You got to declare your major. What would you like to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to go into construction, so maybe I was at a liberal arts college. They didn't have a big engineering program, but they did have an engineering program. I said, I think this is what I'm going to do. And my dad, in his very typical sense, and you know him well enough to know, he goes, "No, you're not." And he said, "English, philosophy, or history, pick one."
Really?
And I was like, wow, coming from my dad, right? Like
The construction guy.
Yeah. And he said, learn how to read, learn how to write, learn how to speak, and I'll teach you the rest. And it was really one of those moments in time where I said, wow, right? And what was really interesting is he was right, because
this industry has nothing. The construction industry has so little to do with construction.
Right. And it's about interpersonal relationships. It's about critical thinking. It's about being able to speak clearly, to write a letter, right? Like all these stuff. And so I was very, very fortunate that that I had the training that I had growing up as a teenager, and then being able to experience something in college that was foreign to me. And then being able to kind of put that together as a career. So it's really funny. I would go to these interviews sometimes, and they'd get to my resume, and they'd be like, philosophy. I said, oh, there's a story behind this.
I have a PhD in construction.
Let me tell you my story.
Let me tell you about my dad.
Let me tell you about my dad. Right. So that was kind of an interesting thing. But my family was all, everybody was in construction, including my grandparents, and it was a fabulous childhood. That's all I can say, right?
When did you think that, or when did you know that construction would be your path? Did you ever feel like it wasn't your path? And
no, I never felt that way. It was just one of those things that it was a family business. So like we talked about it all the time. And
that's just who we are.
And when it was summertime, it was time to go to work. And when it was school time, it was time to go to school. Right. So
that's cool. So you guys had your family business, but I know you for being the president of Suffolk. Mm-hmm. How did that transition happen? How did you get into Suffolk, and how how have you seen Suffolk grow from you starting as as an estimator essentially to becoming president?
Yeah. Well, I came to Suffolk after there's the savings and loan crisis that happened in Rhode Island, which was a big event that happened in the early '90s, where a lot of companies basically went out of business because the banking industry basically dried up. I had an opportunity to meet a gentleman who introduced me to John Fish, and immediately after meeting him, the first time I met him, I said, "Wow, I really like this guy."
John, you're saying John?
Yeah, and so that was I got introduced to Suffolk through a friend of mine.
And you were how old? 23, 24?
I was 24, 25. So, and so I started off as a I'm kind of like the poster child for no glass ceilings, right? I started off as like a junior estimator, and then from there, just progressed. I had a lot of support, right? And kind of progressed throughout my career. But I think a lot of it has to do with I tried really hard to learn from a lot of people, right? I realized that there was a lot of things I didn't know. There's still a lot of things I don't know, right? Like tons of stuff. But what I always tried to do was to treat everybody respectfully across the board, no matter what, right? You can have a tough conversation and still be respectful. And I tried to really get the best thinking of multiple people on every issue, which continued to inform as I got older, right? I always think back on some of the advice that I've gotten, even from the earliest years, and I'm like, that was a great idea. Or, and so over time, through a tremendous amount of support from a lot of people, I was able to kind of grow my career.
Yeah.
And it was kind of it's been really. It was a wonderful opportunity for me. I mean, it's just I don't even know what else to say. It was fantastic.
Every time I talk to you, the more I talk to you, I realize that a lot of people played a big role in your life and your development. Like the reality is that you don't go from a junior estimator to the president of a company without two things. Number one is just an ability to lead and a desire to lead. I feel that from a childhood, I felt like you were almost bred to be a leader. And another one is that you just had like this this hunger to just really serve in the best capacity that you could in the organization. And then it didn't need to be, your company, but you made it your company. Because when I was there, I felt that I owned Suffolk. So I can only imagine how, the president of Suffolk, feels about that.
Yeah.
And how important mentorship is in this whole part of it. Who was your mentor other than your dad throughout this process? Because I don't think that Jeff Gouveia, made it, to be where you're at now, alone.
No, it was kind of like my cast of thousands, I guess, right? Mentorship is not a seniority thing, right? Mentorship is like is up, down, sideways, right? And so, outside of my dad, John, my family, right? I like, for instance, I get mentorship from my wife, mentorship from my kids, right? Who grew up as digital natives and I didn't. And so when I ask them certain questions about, about technology or social media, and they can give me answers like that, that's mentorship.
Yeah.
And so when I think about, sure, I've had some figures that have been senior in my life, right? Like my dad, John, and others. But I think I've had thousands of mentors, right? I've learned a little bit from each person. And so in creating these friendships, you're giving of yourself, they're giving of their self, therefore there's a mentorship there, right?
Yeah.
And you learn a lot from your everyday interactions. So I think, unfortunately, too many situations where someone says, like, this person was like my mentor. I think that everybody in life has multiple mentors throughout their entire life. They just don't know it.
Yeah, there's a lot of people inspiring them throughout the process.
Yeah. People who are inspirational, here's one, someone we knew very well. Like, we worked together, Jerry Snell.
Yeah.
Right? Totally inspirational when you walk on his project site and he would say, "Good morning, young man."
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah. That's inspirational. And then you say, "Well, what about this?" He's like, "Well, right?"
Even if it's for the smallest, most specific task, you can really pinpoint, or sometimes you can't, and it's okay. But if you look back, you can say, "Wow, I never used to do that until I met that guy or that girl," and I think that's really important. I'm gonna ask you a couple change of conversation. Yeah. You were talking about the what was it? There was the Rhode Island crisis. Talk to me about.
Yeah, so the savings and loan crisis. So that there was in Rhode Island in the early 90s, I think it was around 1992 or 93, there was a crisis in which the banks, through a bunch of different factors, but the banks basically collapsed.
Oh.
Right. So picture 2009,
which is where I want to talk about.
Picture that in 1992, right? And what ended up happening is that since there was no liquidity in the market, right, projects stopped, and a lot of people who had all of their money, their lines of credit, whatever it was, with these certain banks, just couldn't continue to function.
Yeah.
Right. And as a smaller contractor, restaurant owner, whatever it may be, if your line of credit gets stopped, right?
Yeah, you
can be out of business like the next day.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what happened, right?
So you have the crisis that happened in the early 1990s that you went through, and then you essentially go through another crisis in 2008. How do you see our industry, real estate, construction, going now through both of those crises? How do you see this industry right now?
Well, I think that there's a third crisis that we went through, and it was COVID.
Yeah.
Right. So you when you stack those on top
you
of
should
each
write,
other,
you should write a book because you've gone through a few crises.
Yeah. But I think here's where I'm concerned about the state of our industry. I don't think that there are enough people coming out of high school, college, going into the trades, right? I think that for whatever reason, and it varies geographically maybe, right? But you're seeing a lot less people going into the trades, and you see a lot of the folks that would be the senior mentors retiring. And there used to be a fairly large influx of talent, right, coming out of like trade schools and other, welding school, whatever it may have been, and going into the trades and becoming like amazing,
plumbers or electricians or whatever.
Electricians, whatever. But there's been there's a whole world of industries that didn't exist like when I was in college, right? So when I was in college, there were no cell phones, right? Well, not everybody had one. They were huge. There was no internet, right? Which meant there was no social media, which meant that. And so if you think of this entire world that
how different it is now,
how has been created, and how many different opportunities there are for people.
Yeah.
And our business, unfortunately, hasn't kept up technologically with the rest of the world, right? It hasn't.
Yeah, just because it's so physical.
Right, it's so physical, and so I think that we're losing people to retirement faster than we're replacing them, and I think there's a really large gap that is upon us right now. And if the industry doesn't do something about that, that's going to really hamper the process, because at the same time as that's happening, technologically from a design standpoint, we're pushing the boundaries like has never been done before, right? With the advent of new materials that are stronger and lighter, and the way that we can design things now. So the projects are getting larger and way more complicated, yet the folks that are really, really good at that,
the skilled tradesmen are
retiring.
Are retiring.
Yeah, and so that's where this intersection is going to be really interesting to see, and that's where I think technology is going to have to supplement some of that, because if you don't have, let's use construction in Miami. If you run out of qualified tower crane operators, what happens? The world stops. Yeah, I'm using that as just an example.
Yeah.
So I think that the training in making our industry.
But I feel like we almost kind of brainwashed. And a lot of this happened in the early 90s, even through like the Clinton administration, where everybody was like college. And where if you didn't go to college, you're almost seen as like a failure. Because before it wasn't like that. Before it was like you become a tradesman and you're very proud of your trade.
Right.
And then, through the late 80s, early 90s, if I would have never had graduated, I think my family probably would have felt like, hey, what happened to Oscar? Why did he give up on his life? And I think that's a major misconception in society in general. It's not even in the construction industry that people, like, not everybody needs to go to college. And if
I agree,
it's very dangerous recipe, honestly, what we've done, because you give somebody a $250,000 loan, but you don't give them a $250,000 mortgage,
right?
And it's crazy. And my concern is, I wasn't really part of the 2008 crisis, and I wasn't part of that the Rhode Island banking crisis that you're saying. Do you see any hints or any sorts of resemblance in where we are now? Very high interest rates, extremely high inflation, prices are through the roof, labor is at all-time low. Do you see any type of comparison now to the other crises that you've seen in the past?
Well, the only thing I can say when it is in comparison, because they were all very different.
Because people are watching, and they people have money invested in real estate, or they want to buy a property, or maybe there's that person that they say, I've been saving and I couldn't buy a house in 2019 or 2020. I've been trying to buy a house. Here's this guy with a lot of experience, gone through this, this industry and gone through life. I think people really want to know, like, something like another like bomb coming, to the crisis. Do you see any of that happening?
The world is really complicated today, right? And we saw some of the effects of even like mini crises and what effect that can have on our industry. Like, for example, not too long ago, there was a ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal, right? And that basically halted all material shipments, and a lot of the stuff that would have been coming from overseas on our projects were stuck.
Yeah.
And what that creates is this huge backlog of uncertainty. One event like that. And think about like the world events that we have. And this isn't like, I'm not being gloom and doom here, but there's a lot of things happening in the world right now that could potentially impact
our industry here.
Our industry.
Yeah.
Right? And that doesn't have to be just natural disaster or a crisis like that. It could be a major company that gets acquired by another company, becomes a conglomerate, and all of a sudden they change all of their business practices, right? And so it could be a crisis like COVID, or it could be these little things that happen. I think the companies who really invest in the future of technology in our business, because we're so far behind, right? We're so far behind as an industry compared to every other industry, right? You think about the automobile industry, the automotive industry. I mean, they're so far advanced, right? When you watch, like, especially some of the car companies like Mercedes and these, the super high end, they're so far advanced
in technology.
And I mean, who would have ever thought that you would have a camera in your car that would allow you to put it in cruise control, right, and not have to pay attention because the car will slow down and speed up, right? Who would have ever thought that would happen? So our business is going to go that way. I think the companies that embrace it are going to be the ones that are going to be the leaders, right? Because certainly in all of the other industries, there have been companies that had ideas, and they implemented those ideas, and they were ahead of their time, and they made a big bet on the future, right? I mean, streaming. Everybody when the streaming services came out, right? There were companies like Blockbuster Video who said that the future is still in VHS, right?
They couldn't adjust.
Videotapes, they couldn't adjust. And then these little companies control now the entire universe of streaming, right? It was one idea and a very progressive idea that people got behind, and then all of a sudden it changed an industry.
Yeah, it's something that really worries me and concerns me, because they never saw it coming, and you almost have to guess, or you have to be very lucky that what you guess at is where it's at. And we're trying to do the most we can with IT and with AI. Coming from Suffolk, that I think their motto was build smart for a long time. How have you seen technology really make a big impact in construction? I've seen an amazing transformation, and obviously Suffolk has been a big a national leader in that in that vision. There's a lot of investment. It's a lot of investment, and that's why it's really hard sometimes, because if you're investing in something that you think is going to be the next thing, or that you think is going to be improve efficiency, or make you more predictable, whatever it may be, right? It's a big bet when you could be using those funds for something else. Bet.
Because the margins in our business are not huge, right? Yeah. So you got to really place the right bets. And but what I've seen in a very short time, call it a 10-year window, maybe a 12-year window, at Suffolk was really transformational. I mean, it was. And I'll give you an example. So there's a group, Suffolk Technologies, right, that basically invests in startup companies in our industry, right? There was one particular company called Open Space, and that has revolutionized, right, the way that we look at projects. The practical use of open space, though, was during COVID, when there were people who couldn't travel. You were actually able to do a project review. An open space is a 360 camera on that mounts on the hard hat, and our folks were able to walk a job and have, like a Zoom meeting, which didn't exist. Zoom and Teams were not as hot, and they were able to see a 360-degree walk through a project from across the world in certain cases. Wow. And so when you think about the efficiency that one thing added to a crisis, in the middle of a crisis, but
somebody had to prepare for that. Somebody had to make a bet on those people,
right? And so that was, I believe that was one of the first investments that Suffolk Technologies had made.
Nice.
And for me, what I saw is owners who now wanted to have a video as-built of a project, especially like in healthcare construction. So now you have a 360-degree video next to the model, and they know exactly where the med gas is in the head wall. There's no more guessing. I mean, you can actually see it, and you can see it in the model, and it's behind that wall. And all of that was the product of a vision, right?
Yeah.
And a project of making investments in what's next. And I think our industry needs to be more proactive in betting on what's next, because there's been a lot of industries that have done that and are light years ahead of our industry.
Yeah, it's something that, and obviously the podcast is, I didn't invent the podcast. The podcasts have been going, but sometimes I put my head on the pillow and I just thinking, what am I not thinking about? Like, and it's hard because sometimes we get so busy, and I get so busy, and there's so many emails, and there's so much stress, and but I really pray, that I always can have, like, I always tell people, I always try to be so calm and so quiet that I can, like, hear the whispers, in my head, that, allow God to speak to me, like because a lot of those people that created Open Space and all those people are sometimes just sitting in a room, in a quiet room, and they're just thinking. And I think that it's important that sometimes we separate, this craziness that we're in, and just, relax and allow for that creativity. Because if we're so busy, I don't think that our minds have, allow us to be creative. And, through this podcast and through the media and different things that we're doing now, I've realized that it's really important for me to step away sometimes and just allow this, creativity. And because somebody has to lead somebody else into the next step, into the next generation. And I hope that we can be a company like Suffolk to go into that direction, so that people can look back and say, hey, John Bell Construction made a positive impact, in our industry, which is, to say that is, it's a big feat.
It is. It's a huge feat, but it has to do with passion for curiosity, right?
Passion about curiosity. Really want it.
You got to really want it, and for the folks in any industry, it doesn't. But for the folks who have continuously pushed the envelope of what could be, most of those companies have stayed ahead. There are some that fell behind, right? There are some that fell behind and then realized it and then had the wherewithal to get ahead.
Yeah.
But our industry definitely needs to change.
And I think it's going to happen. I just think it's a matter of time, and through technology and people need places to live, and they need buildings to occupy for work and all that. So I think it's coming. It's even if we like it or we don't, there's a big wave coming. Yeah. I'm gonna ask you a couple rapid fire questions. You have about 3 seconds to answer each one, and first thing that rips off your mind, I want you to tell me. I think you should take a sip of wine.
Okay.
What's your favorite football team?
New England Patriots.
Okay. Boston and New York?
Boston.
Late nights at the office or walking on the beach with your daughter?
Walking on the beach with my daughter.
Would you ever write a book?
I'm writing 2.
You're writing 2 right now? Favorite food?
Oof. Favorite food is seafood, any variety.
What's your favorite time of the day?
Early morning.
Your greatest Suffolk memory?
The friendships that were created.
Favorite thing to do growing up?
Be on the boat.
Describe John Bell in 3 words.
Passion, grit, family.
That was pretty good. You actually, you got stuck on the favorite food one, right?
I have so many. Listen. My parents were in the restaurant industry too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of.
Today we went to lunch, and I never seen you so happy when your snapper fillet came.
Yeah, it was so great. What an awesome restaurant that is.
Yeah, it was a little hole in the wall. Today we went to Florida here in Miami, and there's a lot of places that are great that people don't know about. Not only restaurants, but just throughout the city. The city is just filled with them. There's a lot of bad, but there's also a lot of great ones.
So interesting about that restaurant, right? First time I've ever been there. So here's what I noticed. Outside the food was spectacular. They greeted you when you walked in the door, right? Not just because they knew you, because you were going to be a client of theirs, right? They showed us to our table. When we sat down, they made sure it was sparkling clean, right? Everybody had a smile on their face, right? And when the food came out, it was amazing. And when we left, everybody shook our hand when we walked out the door, and you got a big hug.
Yeah,
from Tia.
Yeah, from Tia.
So think about that. So the culture that they've created in that restaurant, made you feel like family. It's the first time I've ever been there.
Hey, you go again.
Yeah, and I would go there tomorrow. Yeah. Right. So interesting.
I think, and it's such a simple recipe. We're talking about that at the beginning of the show. Sometimes we can overcomplicate the simplest things, but those people could be having a terrible day, and they still were able to say good afternoon, and they hugged us and they walked us that's what we want to do here. Yeah. At the end of the day, we want, and it's not always as easy as we want it to seem or want it to be, but we take a lot of pride that our clients can feel the way that we felt today at lunch, that they can say, I had a great experience there. And maybe today they didn't get our order, wrong, but sometimes maybe the order came out wrong, but they said, they fixed it quickly. They were very apologetic, and that one instance is not going to, determine my relationship with them. It was just
right. You're going to get the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Right. And if you and what happens is, in that situation, if someone said, "Hey, when you went down to see Oscar, where did you eat?" I would tell them the restaurant we ate at, and I would say I had a great experience, and then they would say, "Well, maybe next time I'm in Coral Gables, that's where I'm going to go." Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah. It's word of mouth. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. Yeah. And I would say that the restaurant business is probably even tougher than the construction business.
No, I would say. I don't know if that's possible, but it is.
I think it is.
Yeah, it definitely is. But listen, we had a great day today. I appreciate you coming down from Rhode Island and taking away time from walking down the beach with your daughter to spend time with us. And you spend some time talking to our team on leadership. And that really means, the world to us, because I never pretend to be the best leader, and I don't, pretend to be the best, podcast host. My goal is always just to be better. And as long as we can continue to get better, the days that we have here on Earth, that's good enough for me. I feel that that to me is the biggest key, because I feel that sometimes you can get to like the epitome, and I always say, you're only as good as your last at bat, and they'll remember you. You can be the best leader, like you said today. You can have the best relationship with that person. You have a bad encounter, or they have a bad encounter, a bad experience with you, and they're not going to remember you for the 100 conversations that you had, positive, but they're going to remember you for that one time that you made them feel bad. It's kind of almost like childhood. Kids remember the good times and they remember the bad times. They don't remember anything else.
Right. And I think that and because we're all human, right? There's going to be those situations where you say something that maybe you shouldn't have, but that's where the trust comes in. So if you've built a friendship in a deep friendship and a trust with someone over time, and you both have credibility with each other, when you do say something wrong, like we all do, like you get the benefit of the doubt. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but like if today, if my food wouldn't have come out perfect, I know that's not it's not a resemblance of who they are as a restaurant. Right. But because they've, through a long time, have created this trust that this food is going to be always well prepared, it's going to be warm, it's going to be fresh, it's going to be organic, they're going to greet me. And if that one time or even the second time, I'm still going to go back.
Yeah, but what would be great, right, is for you to give them the feedback, because you care about them and you care about their business. And so
respective feedback.
Yeah, maybe you say, hey, listen, it wasn't prepared exactly the way you did it the last 15 times I was here, and they might say, oh, wow, you know what? Because the chef is out.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I understand. I just want to let you know. They go, oh, thank you, right? But absent that feedback, another person comes in, has the same issue, and then that could really hurt a business. And it's the same in our business, right? Like, truthful feedback is sometimes really difficult to swallow, especially when you have a lot of passion about what you do. It's difficult, right? We're humans. We go, but if you encourage feedback and you don't take it personally, especially with someone who cares deeply about you, use it as a learning experience. I do all the time. Listen, we all make a lot of mistakes every single day, right? But when we have relationships where people will tell you, will basically call you out on it, right? And you not get defensive with them. That's the other thing, right? As soon as you get defensive, nobody's going to talk to you anymore. But if you're like, oh, wow, that's interesting.
I appreciate it,
you're like, I appreciate it. It hurts, but I appreciate it, right? Because you can be honest too. Then, I think we all become better for it. I really do. And whether it's business or family or friendships, in my mind, it's kind of all the same, right? If you don't work really hard in your personal life or your professional life to create lasting friendships, you're going to have problems. You are. But if you have people who support you, there's going to be times when it gets really bad in your life. Everybody has that thing, and then you have all these people that come behind you, to support you.
That's when you're going to want to wish that you listened to them and you were respectful for them and you told them good morning. You were there for them, because not everybody, like you say, is perfect. But Jeff, I really appreciate your first of all, I appreciate your friendship.
Of course,
I really do.
Likewise, by the way.
Yeah, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for people like you. And there's, like you said, there's 1,000 mentors in my life, and I'm very proud that you're one of them. And just bringing a different insight of what leadership really is. That the key to leadership, is trust and respect, and really getting down to understand that people, they're human, and that they really have a life other than your life, and that they're going through things that maybe you don't know about. And I think that if we can incorporate that human perspective of leadership, I think we could be better leaders. And I think you do a great job of that. And I think your dad and your family would be extremely proud, especially John Fish and the whole Suffolk community. So we appreciate you being here. So we hope you had a good insight of what leadership is in the eyes of Jeff Gouveia. And, I echo a lot of the things that he says, because I think that I could be a much better leader. I think I could do a lot of things much better. I don't pretend to be perfect or great, but I just do accept the fact that, hey, I want to grow, I want to get better, and I'm sure a lot of people also want to grow and get better. Our hope is that through this podcast, maybe not the things that I say, but through the guest, that you can listen and get inspired, and really just be a better leader, person, husband, wife, friend, because this world is really challenging. There's a lot of things going, and if you can just navigate through those difficult times that you're going through, you never know the impact of somebody else's life you're going to make. You know, maybe it may be an intern at your company, and maybe one day you're on their podcast. So, but we'd love your feedback. If you guys can comment, like, subscribe in the comment section, let us know what you think. We really want to hear about the feedback and honestly how you feel that the podcast is going. This podcast is for you. It's not for us. We're trying to just bless you, and through the relationships and the people that we know and the experiences that we have in life, we hope that that you don't make the same mistakes that we do, and that the people that have mentored us can somehow mentor you in the same light. And don't be afraid to mentor somebody. And you might be already, you just may not know it. So we'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a great day.